being cut from a team leaves a hole in your heart. It leaves an emptiness in you. You walk away feeling dejected, feeling embarrassed. It's a hard thing, and there's a hole there. But what a hole does is it allows you a chance to fill it back up with something else.
Sports in general are humbling. Mm-hmm. They're filled with heartache and disappointment, and there's challenges. And this type of thing is just an extension to that. It's different, but really it's an opportunity to learn and to learn about life and to prepare for those types of feelings, the emotions and that you're going to face in life, and you will face them in life. There's no escaping it. There's disappointment in life.
Episode number 21 is here, and it's a tough one. Coaches, have you ever had to make cuts? Players, have any of you ever been cut from a team? Parents, have you ever had to deal with the disappointment of your son or your daughter being cut from a team? That's what Pat and I are talking about in today's episode, and we're going to get right into it. It's episode 21 on the Coaching Life Podcast right now. Welcome to another episode of the Coaching Life Podcast. I'm Chris Stewart, and I'm here with my co-host, Patrick _Martin.
How's it going, everyone?
At yahoo.com, I guess I should say.
Yeah, so. That's me. Now, if it's Twitter, it's Patrick __.
2 underscores,
right?
That's correct.
It's the only one. The other one wasn't available, so I had to go with that.
So that's his Twitter, Patrick __ Martin, and I'm C Stewart 1993. So we'll just start out that way if you want to connect with us.
Please
of course,
do.
I don't know if I like starting out that way on today's episode, just because of what today's episode is going to be about. I don't want people contacting me about today's episode. I'm kidding about that.
Yeah.
The reason I say that, guys, is because, and gals, and anyone who's listening out there, is because today we have an episode planned for you that is particularly difficult. It's probably not going to be, I'll say this, it won't be as difficult to talk about as it is to do.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's very difficult for everyone involved, and it's not something that anybody likes. And the thing that I'm talking about is making cuts. Coaches having to make cuts in order to narrow down their rosters on their teams to the basically where they believe the team needs to be for that particular season to be as competitive as possible. And so I want to just sort of introduce the topic in this way, and we have several different factors that we want to talk about related to cuts. And obviously, I think the most obvious ones are, the major players involved in making cuts, which is coaches, the athletes, of course, and athletes' parents as well. Those are, and then on top of that as well, it's anyone and everyone who might be a friend of the athlete or a family member of that athlete, because in today's world of social media, often you find out about cuts pretty quickly.
True.
Because it's posted, and then people who have no connection at all whatsoever with the team or with the coach or with anyone that just might be a family friend, they tend to jump on and do what I have called in one of my books. It's not original by me, but I wrote an entire chapter about it called groupthink, which happens so often in today's youth sports world when it comes to parents and folks not appreciating something about a coach or a team and wanting to air it out, and then everyone jumping on whether they know anything about it or not.
Right.
And that could be a legitimate complaint or not. I mean, it just happens, and it seems to blow out of control like a wildfire. And to get back to the topic, this is one that I would say, and I'm going to speak primarily as a coach, but I also speak as a parent, although I cannot, this is one area that I really can't empathize in because I've never had a child get cut from a team. I've had kids not get the kind of playing time or playing different roles than what I thought they should be playing, and so I felt that, but I've never felt the pain that's associated with having to sit down with my child who was cut from a team. And that's a hard thing. it's a hard thing to talk about when you've not experienced it, but we're going to try, and I can talk about it from the coach's perspective. And so I know we have parents listening out there who maybe have experienced this yourself, and you would like to, we're going to pull back the veil a little bit and let you see what's in a coach's heart and in their minds. And I'll speak from that perspective, and we'll do our best to try to understand the parent's perspective as well, and the athlete's perspective, and try to offer some advice to all parties involved by the time this thing is wrapped up. But I'll just say this, Pat, and I'm sure that you agree as well. Well, first of all, making cuts is something that I have had to do a number of times. Is it something that you've experienced?
Yes, I've experienced it.
Yeah. Anyone who is coaching a scholastic sport, a high school sport, or a middle school sport that is a National Federation of High School Sports sanctioned sport, you probably have had to experience this if you are in a school district that has a number of students come out for a team. For example, if you have, I think about basketball right off the top of my head because you only have 5 kids on the floor in basketball. And if you have 20 kids come out for a basketball team and you can only put 5 on the floor at a time, it's not realistic to keep 20 kids on a basketball team.
Right.
And so that is, I know basketball typically has to deal with cuts. I rarely see it happen with football, although it can happen if you're a part of a large school and you only have a certain number of uniforms. Then or even a small school and you have a lot of kids come out and you don't have enough uniforms, you might have to make cuts. Baseball, it's happened. As a varsity baseball coach, I've made cuts probably, or been involved in making cuts probably 6 times over the 13. I would say, as I was looking back over the different rosters I had, I was trying to remember what years I made cuts. And I would say probably a little less than half of the years that I coached varsity baseball, I had to make cuts. And I'll talk about some of the years when I didn't and what went into the planning there and how and why that took place. But I'll tell you this, it's not easy. It is without a doubt, and I can say this as a coach, it's the hardest thing I ever had to do as a coach. It's the hardest thing. We had to do a lot of hard things. You had to make a lot of hard decisions. But the time of year where you have a tryout period and you take some time at the end of that tryout period to however it's done, and we'll talk about different methods for communicating them as well. That is the hardest. Those are the days I don't sleep.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, and I don't sleep because I know that I'm hurting someone. I mean, think about this. The very word cut and cutting, by definition, means to wound.
Yeah.
And well, heck, if you look up the definition of the word cut, it means to separate from the main body, to cut something, right? I mean, to abridge or to shorten something. But I love what the National Federation of High School Sports says. They have a great website, by the way. If you're a high school coach or a middle school coach, take advantage of the resources on the NFHS website, NFHS Learn website, because there are so many things, and not just a coach, but a parent as well, and athletes as well, because there's some really great resources, and they have a great page on this website about cutting and making cuts and experiencing the cutting process. And the very first paragraph of that article says that perhaps a better definition to use is cutting, wounding the feelings severely. And I think they just made that up based on the context of in which we do it.
Right.
And that is true. I mean, I know that I'm going to be sending a kid home who's devastated, at least for a moment, because they really want to be part of the team. They worked hard. They tried their best. Yeah. They maybe hustled as much as everyone else, and they still didn't make it. And then they got to home and communicate. They got to go home and communicate that to mom and dad. And then I feel it as a parent. I envisioned it every single time that I had to do it. I envisioned that being my child, and how would I handle that as a parent? And I'll tell you, to do that as a coach, it makes you pause and consider how you communicate it as well.
Yeah, right. I think I don't know, not being in the situation, cutting is something that I've always been a proponent of. I've always said, well, they should cut. Cutting's necessary.
Oh, I agree with that.
And I still do. I still agree with it.
It's necessary and beneficial.
Right. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But I feel like it's something that until you experience it as a coach, and I guess you could say this as you have to experience it as in every element, in every venue, as a parent and as a player too, to fully understand, the whole concept. But cutting is difficult for a coach, but it's not just kind of a one-time difficult thing. You feel for each individual, at least from my perspective, you do, because you think, as you go through the process of making your determination of who's going to make the team, you're evaluating, these players as individuals.
Yeah.
And you that dive into who they are and what they can bring the team, what they can bring the program, kind of lets you draw closer to them on an individual basis. And it hurts for every instance of a player that you say didn't make the team. It hurts as a coach to do that.
Yeah.
It's not just it's not just a period. It's not just a moment and then it goes away. It's this feeling of understanding that, there's disappointment there for this person and that person and that person.
Contrary to popular opinion, I think coaches are not cold-hearted people. And sometimes I think based on the way a coach presents himself or herself during a game where there's an intensity to them, you can get a perspective of that coach as being like that's a hard and he doesn't care what he says, he's and like a no mercy and it's easy, hey, you didn't make the team, you just weren't good enough. Get out of my office.
Right.
That's not the way. I even the hardest nosed persona coaches from the outside. This is hard. This is devastating. I talked to a lot of coaches who you would look at on the outside and say, I bet cutting's a little bit easier for that guy. It's not. It just isn't. And it's for all the reasons that you said, Pat. You want to make sure that you're making the right decision for your team.
Right.
And so you're evaluating a lot of factors. Yeah. And when you evaluate, like what factors, meaning what can this player bring to our program?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, when I sat down to do it with my coaching staff, it was never something I did by myself, ever. I always involved all of my coaching staff. And sometimes, depending on the circumstances, which we can get into in a little bit, I involve people outside the program to get an objective perspective on particular skills and things like that, and just to be able to present that and say, look, it's not. I mean, this was our criteria,
right? That's a good idea.
And we had some other eyeballs out here too. But to get back to what I was saying, as you sit down and think about it, I tried to talk myself into why I should keep players. This guy, he didn't, he's not as fast. I don't see him playing as much, but I love the attitude, the heart and the hustle's there. But look, sometimes it just comes down to the fact that if you made a list of the best athlete, the one that could provide the most to your program, to the one that's going to provide the least, and that list was 16 kids, and you can only keep 12, those kids that fall 13, 14, 15, 16, they're probably really great kids. They probably have a lot to offer in a lot of arenas of life.
And might be
but they just didn't make it that day.
Yeah, and have been really close, maybe a splitting hair decision. I think there's a little bit of merit to what you said there about, hard-nosed coaches, or just take the example of a coach that really, maybe doesn't care. If there's an individual out there that isn't as impacted with cuts as others would be, they're still making a decision because they want to win, right? They want to be successful as a coach. I mean, no coach goes into a situation and says, I'm just going to take whoever.
Just randomly picks kids and cuts some others.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they don't, that's not going to help them be successful. So
right.
even at the, the bare fundamentals of making this selection, a coach is thinking who gives the program the best chance? What's best for the program? And those are hard decisions.
And whether we like it or not, that is what it comes down to.
Right.
I mean, granted, I would say every athletic department in every high school and junior high, and, because we're primarily focusing here on junior high and high school, I would say sports in this particular topic. I'd say that's the most relevancy to this topic today because, there may be there are travel programs that
sure,
when you come and try, you're not necessarily getting cut. It's just that you didn't make you didn't make that team. There are lots of other teams you could go try out for.
Well,
but if you're in a school, this is the only team you can try out for. If you don't make it, you don't make it.
That's true.
Unless you transfer, and even then, there's no guarantee that you're going to get to play. There's a lot of variables there. But here's the thing: when we're talking about athletic departments, yes, every athletic department probably has goals like these. We want all of our athletes to have fun. We want all of our athletes to learn how to compete and learn the sport that they're playing, and we want our teams to be as competitive as possible. And the reality is that every person involved in high school and junior high athletic endeavors, so all the stakeholders, the athletes, the coaches, the parents, the public, the fans, the people who live in that town, they expect your team to compete.
Yeah, they do.
They want you to win. And so very few athletic directors, I think, and if you're an AD out there, maybe you can confirm this or deny it, they're probably not getting very many calls because people are assuming the players aren't having fun. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would say they're probably getting more emails and phone calls because they're not being as successful as John Q. Public thinks that they should be.
Right. That's the biggest complaint you hear, right?
It seems to be, yeah. Granted, I would say that there probably are some emails and phone calls to ADs from parents whose players are not playing as much as they think they should play, and they're probably coming up with reasons like, "Hey, it's just not any fun," and things like.
Yeah, but in a winning program, those calls don't hold much water.
That's true,
right?
And that's going to often be the response.
Yeah.
Well, we're 10-0.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what do you want me to say? You want me to fire a coach for having a winning program because yours isn't playing as much?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, the reality is, it's possible if you have a player who is consistently sitting the bench all year long and not getting any playing time at all, it's a good chance that is a player the coach might have needed to cut.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of brings us into, in my opinion, we're going to talk about some benefits, for teams and athletes and parents and coaches, everyone kind of involved with this, with the tryout cutting process. I think that for me is a huge benefit because people say, and we can get into this too, and I'm sure we will, that there's disadvantages to cutting kids because the kids go away from the sport, and then you lose kids in the sport. But I think that a kid sitting on the bench that isn't able to define a role within a team. Now, I'm not saying all kids that sit on the bench would experience this, because bench players are role players, and good programs are able to find
Yes.
things for them to do that can help the team. But those roles too are limited,
Right?
So if a player is just sitting on the bench the whole year and never gets playing time, they're going to experience the same type of hurt and the same type of disappointment,
Resentment.
Yeah, that's a good word. Throughout the season, that it's an athlete that doesn't make the team is going to experience,
Momentarily.
one time, right? Yeah. And then they can move on. So sitting the bench on a team with a lot of players could be
less beneficial than being cut one time. We've all heard the expression "rip the Band-Aid off."
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to have that Band-Aid, to not be, to one, have to be the person to rip it, coach, but two, be the person that's being ripped off of.
Yeah.
As a player and as a parent, and I think that I totally agree with you that one of the great benefits to making cuts is, for any team or organization, is that, having that invariable sitting the bench, having it happen consistently, it can develop a resentment that isn't healthy for the team. And it's not healthy for the player as well. And then to build on that, if the player is not cut, but they're sitting the bench and they're putting in a lot of effort and a lot of time under that team, and they're not getting as much out of it in return for themselves, or they don't see the benefit of it, because it still is, I think, very beneficial to anybody to be part of a team and put in that effort, whether you're on the floor or not, or on the field or not in the game. But there might be some other things out there and opportunities out there that player could be involved in and be spending that time in.
Sure.
That was actually better for them,
Yeah.
better opportunities. And so I would say a benefit of cutting, in that one time, okay, it hurts this one time that you didn't make the team this year, but now you're free to pursue other interests and things that you might find something that you're better at and do that. Whether it's another sport or playing an instrument or doing something, finding a hobby, it opens up that window for you. Like when God closes a door, He always opens up another one, right? And it's if you have, granted, being cut from a team leaves a hole in your heart. It leaves a hole. It leaves an emptiness in you. You walk away feeling dejected, feeling embarrassed. It's a hard thing, and there's a hole there. But what a hole does is it allows you a chance to be filled back, to fill it back up with something else.
True.
And so being cut one time, it hurts. But a lot of kids that are cut, I saw this. I saw this when I was a junior high coach. I coached with a guy in junior high. We were kind of co-coaches together, and we had I want to say 17 or 18 kids come out. We only had we had quite a few uniforms, but we only had like 13 uniforms, and so we had to make as many as 4 or 5 cuts. And we one of the kids that did make the team never came back to basketball again.
Right.
And so that's one of the the things that you mentioned earlier. Well, you're going to lose the kid to the sport. But here's the other thing I noticed. I went to their senior follies, it's like a senior variety show thing. This dude's one heck of a musician. I mean,
good.
One heck of a musician. Really, really good. And I thought, wow, I wonder if he started picking that instrument up and that vocal. I mean, he was able to sing and play junior high after getting cut from basketball. Basketball wasn't his thing, but man, he found what his thing was. And there are a lot of kids out there playing basketball that can't play a lick on the guitar.
That's
can't
true.
sing. You know what I'm saying? And I'll say this. We had a football player this week. One of the OU football players played bass for us because our bass player was out of town. Ben was out of town. And I told him later, I said, hey, Jake, here's something I told Brock back when he started playing guitar. There will be a day when the game of baseball or the game of football decides you're done. Your body decides you can't do it anymore.
Yep.
And it comes really soon. It comes a lot sooner than you want it to. But here's the thing. You can play an instrument forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so love that instrument. So I think what it does, making a cut, it will open up an opportunity for you to find another thing in your life that you can become really good at.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, most people, you have the old saying, or at least the old thought, that if an individual's cut, they have, the ability to go out to work hard, to practice over the off season, and come back next year and try out again.
Yep.
Most people kind of poo-poo that thought because they say, once a kid's cut once, he's not going to put the effort in. He's not going to come back.
Or why even bother?
Right.
I wasn't good enough this time, and I'm already going to be behind because I'm not getting to play this season. So,
Which we could disagree with that, right?
but yeah, we could.
Yeah.
we could. And in terms of practice is much more valuable than games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that soon. But I think what I was getting to is it's not always just about that sport that you went out to. Just like you said, it's about freeing up that time for other opportunities. Mm-hmm. I know kids, like from a basketball perspective, if they don't make the basketball team, they go try out for wrestling.
Yeah.
They might be a lot more better equipped at wrestling than they were basketball. So it's things like that you have to consider them benefits, because otherwise they wouldn't be focused on that thing. And I would say something else, that if you have a program that normally keeps it's a team. We'll use basketball. We'll stay on that because you're using the numbers and it's fresh in my head. If you kept 20 kids and 8 of those kids never got in the game, not only is that going to impact those kids that aren't getting in the game, but it's going to impact your program going forward, because kids trying out are going to know that if they're not one of the top, 10, 12 players, they're never going to play anyway. So instead of coming out and working hard and giving, effort and time to sit the bench and be a role player, they're going to, they're going to pass that up and go do something else anyway.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So, there's benefits to it. I think, so, to be fair, there's definitely arguments out there against cutting because of the message, that it sends to kids, kind of damages their psyche a little bit, kind of tells them they don't belong, they don't fit in. I would say, okay, that is something I call life.
I was going to say the same thing. Without being harsh, it's you're right. It's a reality. It is. Yeah. It's welcome to life.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not going to get every job you apply for either.
I applied for a job,
just
about
recently,
a month ago. Yeah, and I thought I had a great shot at it too, and I didn't get an offer.
You were essentially cut.
I was cut
as a 35-year-old.
I wasn't good enough, right? And to be honest with you, I understood the decision. There's also studies out there that say that kids that aren't playing sports are more prone to things like obesity and social disorders and even violence and things like that. And with studies like that, I'm a big science guy and I buy into studies, but I also know that studies can identify symptoms a lot of times and not causes. Yeah. And my counterpoint to anything like that would be, are these kids that are experiencing these challenges, would it have mattered if they were playing the sport or not? And on the flip side, the kids in that same sample that they studied, the kids that say made the team, if they didn't have that sport, would they end up with the same challenges? And my guess is probably not.
Right. Yeah. Probably not.
So I think you got to be careful with those studies that people like to rip off and say, well, this proves you should keep every kid because if not, it's going to cause social disorder.
It's a theory, and there are a lot of theories out there about things like that.
Sure.
So, well, one of the things that you're getting at there is that there are people who are upset when it happens.
Definitely.
And so, I think there are a lot of things that we could do in this episode, and we should do. I think we should give tips for athletes who are trying out for a team. We should give helpful tips on how to respond as an athlete and as a parent. And I think we should also talk a little bit about, as coaches. We know a large majority of our audience that listens are coaches. Mm-hmm. And do you want to talk about that for a little bit about let's get into the from the coach's perspective, because I think it could be really helpful for parents to listen to this as well about what we as coaches need to do to be the best that we can be when it comes to having to make cuts or having team tryouts. Because there are different, as we mentioned, there are different players in this whole theater of making a team. And you've got the players, of course, who are the main characters, and coaches are part of that main role as well, and then parents as well. There's no one probably hurt more than parents when it comes to cutting. I would say that parents are probably hurt more. It's tougher on parents than it is on coaches, I think. It's tougher on parents than it is on players when it comes to cutting. So we don't want to minimize that at all. But here's a message to every parent. Your child's success or lack thereof in any sport does not indicate what kind of parent you are. Having an athlete that has been cut from a team, and that's your son or your daughter, does not mean that you have failed or you have failed them. And I think sometimes as a parent, we take things personally, and it hurts. We see that it hurts our kids, but it may actually hurt us for longer than it hurts the kids. And we've said this before, kids are a lot, when we talked about playing time, we said kids are a lot more resilient than we realize. And sometimes they understand more than we do as parents. And I think that as long as you know that you have a son or a daughter who went out there and they were coachable, respectful. They did everything that they could to be a great teammate. They tried their absolute best. That is the greatest reflection that you can have on yourself as a parent, not whether they made the team or not whether they play a lot or not. We take things, I think, so personal when it comes to that as parents. And so, one, I just wanted to say that. But as coaches, what we have to deal with a number of things when it comes to cuts. One is the fallout. There's a fallout that comes from angry parents and players who didn't make the team. And that fallout that I'm talking about can include things like accusations of favoritism, accusations of you did not use objectivity in your selection process. It was based more on who you know, what your last name is, and things
Right.
like, we've seen, everyone has seen those kinds of responses to cuts and those kinds of accusations. And so I would say, okay, coaches, how can you're never going to prevent that. It does not matter how organized you are when you go into your tryout process. You're not going to prevent all of that. And I can tell you this by experience because I created a manual. I mean, I created a manual. I have a team meeting. I mean, I have not a team meeting, but a tryout meeting, a pre-tryout meeting for anyone that's interested in coming. And I invite parents to come to that as well. And I pull out this page from my manual, and I'm actually looking at it right now. And this is a copy. I pulled a copy of my 2016 Athens Varsity Baseball Manual. On page 6, I have a section that deals with the headers of this section is tryouts, cuts, and selection criteria. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how it went. I let everybody know, okay, we're going to have a tryout. We always determine coming into the season how long the tryout's going to be. And I didn't like having an extended tryout, a week-long tryout. That's just too much time. If you can't figure out who's going to be on your team in a couple days, or maybe you have 100 kids out there, and then it will take longer. But I like to say, hey, tryouts are going to begin on this day at this time. They're going to last 3 days. We're going to have 2 days where we're really evaluating them hard on skills that are defined here later on this tryout page. And all students will be given equal opportunities to go through all of these reps and to interact with coaches and do all the things that are required in our evaluation process. And that's what tryouts are going to look like. After the third day, we will meet with everyone individually and talk about that, about what their role is going to be or not going to be with the team. And so that was just personally the way we handled cuts. Well, I should say it this way. That's the way that I landed on. That's the method that I landed on that I felt is the best way. I've tried more than one. I tried the list, posting the list of people who made the team and letting all the kids know, because I thought that would be less embarrassing, than sitting in front of a coach and having a coach tell you why you didn't make the team. But, I said, well, here's where the list will be, what time will be posted on there. And you'll either see your name on it or you're not. And if you'd like to talk about why your name's not on there, if it's not, then I'd be glad to schedule a meeting with you. Never once had a kid ask for a meeting.
Right.
Had a lot of people complain, openly on social media about not having their kid on the list and make assumptions as to why they weren't on there. But I never had anyone ask for a meeting, which told me this isn't a very effective way to do it. I shouldn't just post a list because one, it leaves a lot of room for assumption. There's no communication there. All that communicates is you didn't make it.
True.
And they want to know why.
Yeah.
And if they're not told why, then they make assumptions as to why.
Yeah.
And and then those assumptions go out there into the public, and then groupthink jumps on. You have all that kind of stuff happen. So the list, I don't think, is a great method. I tried another method the following year, which was I thought, well, instead of having kids wait outside a door and come in and talk one-on-one or pull them in, I thought, well, what I'll do is I will on the fourth day, I will have them come back for just a real light practice on the fourth day. And then as they leave, or I guess we did it the first 2 days. On the third day, this is what I did. So we basically made our criteria. We evaluated in 2 days. And on the third day of tryouts, I already brought envelopes this was probably my worst idea ever. But I brought an envelope with a personal note for every player of what their role was or wasn't going to be on the team. I basically said, you did not make the team this year, and this is the reasons why. So it was a little more than a list.
Why
but it was less personal, than sitting down. So it was a little more personal. It was more than a list, but it still wasn't that personal, because what I did was, as every single one of them walked out the door, I handed them their envelope. So everyone got the same thing. So you got the same envelope. Your name was on the outside. If you made it, you got the envelope. If you didn't make it, you got the envelope. But inside was a note from the coaching staff as to what your role was going to be, or if you didn't make the team. And that was, I don't know.
You didn't like that.
I didn't like it. So
you probably put a lot of work into those letters too.
Oh, you're not kidding.
Put a lot of time into the letters,
But still, there's still no closure for the player.
Right.
Because there's no interaction.
Right.
All the player gets to do is read a brief note and
why do you think
respond.
they don't come back and ask? Because when we talk about how a player should respond, I think if I had advice, that would be the advice that I would give, and I would give that to people that interview for jobs. I'd give it, ask why.
I wonder if it's just because, hey, you cut me loose, I'm not going to give you any more of my time. There's that anger, that initial anger is like, I don't want to go, and maybe embarrassment. I don't want to go sit down and talk to, because I guarantee you they're angry at you.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to talk to you, but I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know why it happens. I can only assume reasons why.
Sure.
But what I think is the best approach is to meet with every single player. Yeah. And when you meet with every single player, you basically explain to them, this is the team that you're on. If you're doing varsity JV, freshman, if you got a whole entire program and they're all trying out, this is where you're going to be. You're either going to be on the varsity or the JV, and this is the role you're going to have, or you did not make the team this year, and this is why. Mm-hmm. And you look them in the eye and you share with them, the reasons why they did or why they didn't, and you give them the opportunity to ask questions, and in doing so, what I've found is it doesn't make it easier. It's not easier, but
probably a little harder. Actually,
yeah. But it provides a little bit of closure, and to see that your name's not on a list, there's just no closure there. You just walk away. You don't know. There's a lot of questions in the air. To have a note given to you at the end, at the end of the practice, and you read that note. Yeah, it's a little more personal, but there's no interaction. There's no communication. Communication has to be two ways, and to be real communication. And so, you can never go wrong with good communication, and that is a two-way street. We talk with one another, and we would tell them that going into those meetings, that we want this to be a dialogue. We're going to share some information with you, but we want you to feel free to speak, to us as well. And we understand that the information we share with you may not be information that you want to hear, but this is the best way to do it, and so we're going to do it this way. It took a little bit more time, and typically what I would do is I would actually do it during practice. We on that third day, we kind of knew where everybody was at anyway, and I would just call them out one by one during practice. And I would talk with them, and I would usually have another coach with me at the time. Not all of them could be, because we had to have coaches running practice.
Right.
But I would always have another coach with me, just because there's a lot of times there is, there's some fiery parents out there that get upset. The kid comes home and says, I got cut, and they may not accurately explain the whole conversation that you had with them. And so
you need someone there to kind of validate what was
you told my
about.
kid this, or and then then it's just you otherwise. But if you have another coach there, they can say, well, that's not really how it went.
Yeah.
This is how it went. So anyway, that is all communicated up front. I think one of the best ways that you can handle it going into it is to let people know, listen, there may be cuts, and here's why there may be cuts. And this is like part 2 of my tryouts and cuts page in that manual, is our program has limited resources. We have limited field space. We have limited practice materials. We have limited playing time. We have limited uniforms. We simply cannot have more kids on the team than we have uniforms for. which limits the number of players we can obviously carry. And so what we're going to do is we're going to let you know that if we have 36 kids come out for a varsity team that only has 25 uniforms, I'm thinking about my varsity baseball team, then first of all, 3 of those uniforms are going to be given to coaches because coaches have to wear a uniform in high school baseball.
Kind of an odd rule.
It is an odd rule. But now I guess technically, I mean, they could do like a pullover and pants,
Yeah.
that'd be fine too. But still 25 is a lot. It's a lot of kids to hold on a varsity team
Yeah.
when you only have 27 games in the season.
22 is a lot.
Yeah. And 22 is what I ended up with, like Brock's senior year, for example. And we'll just let them know it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We will have to cut some people loose if we don't have enough uniforms for them. And so we tell them that. And then I'll let you go ahead, and you seem like you want to say something.
Well, I was going to ask about your the senior year there that you mentioned. You had 22 kids on the roster. How many of those kids really, say played less than, 5% of the time?
Oh, probably off the top of my head, probably about 6 of them.
Yeah.
Played less than 5% of the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I just
one of them
curious.
One of them was told going into it that he wasn't going to play at all.
Right.
I sat down with one player and said, "Look, we're not going to make cuts, but I want you to know that your role is going to be much like a player assistant role.
Sure.
I want you to come to practice early and help me set up. I want you to chase foul balls like it's your job during a game. I want you to understand that this is the role. We just with the kind of talent we have on this team this year and the number of seniors we have on this team, and this was a senior actually, and I don't believe in putting a senior on a JV team. So I said, you're either going to make the varsity team or you're going to be cut. And I said, according to our criteria, the criteria in our evaluation process and our criteria, you don't make the cut. And so we want you to. We have enough uniforms for you. We want you to be part of the team as long as you can understand what your role is going to be. And I'm telling you, you can't go into this season expecting to get in one game, to get one at bat. And I said, if you're okay with that, and if you're okay with understanding your role, then you can be part of the team. But if not, if it's going to be a problem for all of us, you and me together, then let's just cut this. Let's just cut ties right now.
Yep.
And he actually was pretty excited about the idea of just being on the team. This was the kind of player who knew where he stood. And he's like, I'll be fine with that.
And he served a purpose.
He served his purpose. And he was the best daggone foul. You could not get a foul ball before that guy.
That's
and
good.
I made other guys. I made other guys. We had to rotate guys in the dugout, but he ran after all of them. He was good. Yeah.
I think it's just good to mention that because maybe first time coaches or young coaches, it's good to think about those opportunities that they can have for it's not just about the kids that you think, this is how many we're going to be able to play, or this is how many we're going to play. Especially in a sport like baseball, or I guess football might be the same type of thing. You can use those extra bodies. You always are able to use them.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. So,
scout teams are so important. Having that, in practice time, having those extra bodies is so valuable.
Right.
And
I also agree that seniors should not play JV ball.
Oh yeah,
that might get us in trouble though.
I don't know why. I mean, what's the whole purpose of having a JV team?
Yeah.
It's a developmental team. Yeah.
Right.
And so it makes no sense to me to have. I mean, if you have no chance of playing varsity the following year, I mean, whether you're not good enough to play, I mean, if even a kid that's not good enough, you're like, there's no way this kid's going to play varsity next year as a junior.
Right.
I mean, like as a senior this year, probably should cut that one loose.
Yeah.
But at least then, as a junior, at least there's still a chance that they could develop and surprise some people and make the varsity team the next year. But if you're a senior, you literally have no chance of playing on the varsity team the following year because you're a senior, you're graduating.
Right.
You shouldn't be on the JV team.
I probably agree
sorry.
with the first thing you said there about juniors too.
Right. Well, and I should say this too. There probably is an exception.
Sure.
And I would say the
exceptions to
exception would be if you didn't have enough players to field a JV team.
Yeah.
And you had to take you had to put a senior down on for that reason. I would do that.
The thing that gets me, and I think we could have another podcast episode and have people in that believe for or against it, is that it's just there's a fundamental flaw with taking playing time and practice time away from a younger athlete that's going to be able to help your program later for an athlete that is
on the JV team,
right.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, and listen,
there.
I'll say this about JV ball too. I don't care what their record is.
Nah.
We're not hanging banners in our gymnasium for your JV team, where there is no JV conference champions and JV district champions and JV state champions and things like that. It doesn't mean the JV program isn't important. It
doesn't mean you don't coach to win or play to win.
Absolutely. Yeah. But if I would say one of the things that I encouraged all my JV coaches to do was to find ways to give more kids opportunities more often than you would if you were a varsity coach. Because as a varsity coach, we're coaching to win every game all the time. And if that means that we can't get this kid an at-bat in this game because he's not going to give us a better chance than the other kids in the lineup, then you're not going to get an at-bat this game. But on the JV team, you go ahead and make that decision. Let's get this kid an at-bat. And that's just where it's different. That's where it's different. And then people have different philosophies about it. That's just what our philosophy always was. But I'll tell you, one of the things that you've got to communicate up front too when that pre-season meeting about making cuts or not making cuts is this is how all of our players are going to be evaluated. This is the selection criteria, and be really clear about it. And listen, coaches, you got to have a pretty good, you've got to sit down and be pretty organized about it. You need to make sure that you have an evaluation and selection protocol and that it is communicated up front so that everybody knows. And so I can tell you, I'll read to you what ours says for the baseball one here. I say players will be evaluated on a number of criteria. These criteria include, and there's a list of 9 things: overall athleticism, arm strength, running speed, pitching ability for pitchers only, fielding ability for catchers, infielders, and outfielders, hitting ability for every player, power and bat control, hustle and work ethic, attitude, and commitment. So there's a list of 9 things.
That's a holistic view too, and one of those things doesn't necessarily trump another. I think
exactly. In fact, the 2 paragraphs underneath that say this: these criteria are not in any order of rank. Players may be selected for the team for any one or combination of these skills. So you may have an incredible arm, and you may light up the radar gun, in the 90s. But you can't run and you can't hit. I tell you what, though, if we can get you to throw a strike, you're going to be on the team.
Yeah, right.
And so
maybe that's all
may be
you
the only
do,
thing that you can do
at an elite level, right?
I've taken kids before just because they could run.
Yeah,
and they I had kids come out for baseball, and if you've not played much baseball in your life, it means that you're not going to be very skilled. It's a skilled sport. It's a skilled-based sport, and so you can't just come out as a junior or senior in high school, having never played since you were in elementary school, and expect to be very good. But I've had kids that come out because they're a senior and it's the spring. It's like, I've never played a spring sport, but I'd like to be with my friends, and they could run a 6.5 60. I was like, how am I going to cut this kid?
Right.
And so I just pull them aside and say, listen, I got enough uniforms. I'll keep you because you're athletic. You can run fast. You can't throw or you can't hit a lick. So that means we need a runner.
Exactly.
You're in. So you're going to be the best darn base runner. You know what your role is.
Yeah, you envision immediately where you can use them to impact the game. You're right.
So it could be any one or any number of those things.
Sure.
And then I finally say this. The last paragraph says this: that while selection of players is based on skill sets specific to baseball, other characteristics of players will also be considered. These include drive, having a strong desire to succeed, coachability, their maturity, their temperament, consistency, their knowledge of the game, their competitiveness. These are all characteristics that form a player's makeup and are vital to the success of the team. And so I say, often the player with the greatest desire will develop into a better baseball player than the one with better physical tools. And so sometimes that'll be taken into consideration as well. And so, when we sit down with these players at the end of the tryout period, I would go back to the selection criteria and let them know, here's where, here's where what we saw with you. We just looking down through overall athleticism. If we're rating you from a 1 to a 5, you're probably a 2. You don't have a lot of athleticism, but man, you swing the bat really well. We can tell that you've really worked on your hitting, and so we want to help you work on a little bit becoming a little more athletic. But we think that you can help us with the bat, and in addition to that, you were very courteous to every coach that worked with you, and you were the first one here, and you helped pick up equipment at the end of practice, and we really appreciate that kind of a player. But it tells us that you have a desire to serve, and we need people who want to serve, because that's what make the great team, the best teammates. And so while there are other areas of this selection list that you were weak in, because you showed us that during your tryout, you made the team. Congratulations. And that might be an example of how we would handle that. We literally would go back to that criteria and tell them what pieces of it they fulfilled.
Yeah.
Or didn't fulfill.
That's great. Yeah. And like you mentioned before, you're still going to have, no matter how you define it and communicate it, you're still going to have people that are upset. You're going to have people that disagree. They're going to say, whatever, whatever skill or intangible that we're talking about, they think they have more or less. Mm-hmm. You can't control, the way people respond to the way you facilitate this process, but you can control the way you prepare for it. And you can control,
yes,
the way that you define it. It's a function of your program. It's just like, planning a practice, or, and it's like strategizing for a game. You have to put thought into it and put some time into it. And at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with that process, and
it's yours.
Yeah,
you're taking, coach, you're taking ownership of it. It's exactly like making a lineup out.
Sure,
it's the same thing.
Right.
You're selecting some kids and not others.
Yep.
And it's the same reason why parents and fans get upset about the lineup, is that some kids are in it they don't think should be in it, and theirs is not, and so they're upset. Some kids made the team and theirs did not, and so they're upset. But here's the thing: what it always comes down to, you may be accused of not being objective or having poor judgment. But the reality is, it is your opinion as to what the best opportunity for this team to be successful is for this year, this season. It is your opinion, and it's not, and you're the coach.
Yeah, and I think I would use that fact as advice to athletes out there that maybe don't make a team when they try out, especially at the junior high level or younger ages, because a lot of times that same coach is not going to be the coach the next year, or the staff. That staff might be different, especially at the younger ages. And when that changes, opinions change, right? You're talking about a completely different.
If you really believe that the difference wasn't that much between the last person that made it and you, then it might just be that next coach sees something in you that he doesn't see in somebody else.
Right.
And so stay at it if the case. But I want to say this too, because we're teetering pretty close to something here that I don't like. And that is comparing to other kids. And so as a coach, never, ever, ever compare players in those meetings when you're talking about making cuts.
Because that's what people's going to do.
That's
a lot of times.
That's what part of the aftermath is.
They're going to say,
the fallout.
Well, you didn't take my kid, but you took this kid.
Yeah.
And that's you get yourself in trouble when you're talking about that.
Stay away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would also say this, adding a lot of alsos. Only make cuts as a last resort.
Yeah.
If you don't have to, don't do it.
Yeah.
Give more kids a chance to be on the team. Just be really honest with what the role is going to be. That's why some years I didn't have cuts, because when we had, when those kids came out and we're looking, and I'd have Coach Hewitt would come up to me and be like, man, you got 42 kids. What do you think? And some people have a different idea. They're like, well, we've never had more than 18. We can't have more than 18, can we? And I was always of the mindset of, I'd actually rather have more. I think our leadership in this team is good enough to help kids understand what their role is. And I think there's enough buy-in that everybody wants the team to be great, not just themselves individually to be great, that we can handle a larger dugout. We can handle a little bit more, a larger roster than maybe what some other teams could handle. And so I'm always a little more a proponent to have a few more kids on it. And so I'll in that way, and maybe it's just because I'm a softie. I don't because I don't want to make cuts. I do every year. I would almost pray going into tryouts that we wouldn't have more than 45 kids come to try out.
Yeah.
Just because, 45 in terms of we got to select a varsity and JV team, a baseball roster for varsity and JV, and 20 apiece is about as much as we could go with in terms of our uniforms and our resources. I mean, for those early days, we're practicing in the gymnasium, sometimes together, and that's a lot of kids to run through a small gymnasium. So I don't know. I would say make it a last resort, and absolutely, I can't emphasize enough: never compare kids to other kids.
Right.
When you're making that criteria.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, you're talking about what can an athlete do, or what could they have done? What could have been different for them to make the team? And it really is in separation to anything else.
Yeah.
If you do these things,
Yeah.
or if you were at this level, you would have made the team.
Yeah.
The problem that you get into is when you start comparing it's subjective. So you're gonna say, well, yeah, I thought this kid was faster, and in response, the parent or guardian is gonna say, I disagree, and then you gain nothing.
Yeah, outside of getting them out there on the track together and actually running them. I mean, there's nothing good. There's no good that can come out of that, of making the comparison game. Granted, we know that is, that's part of what's happening. I mean, you're evaluating them all together and trying to figure out what's going to be the best 5 I can have on the court, what's going to be the best 9 I can have on the field, or the best 11 on the football field, or whatever. You are evaluating them, and so you're making comparisons in your head. But when it comes down to making the cut and communicating that, you just can't say, well, you almost were there, but this guy, this one was a little bit, he was a little bit faster. Or he was a little bit, they're just
it just leads to disagreement. Yeah, it's not productive. It's not going to get you to the end result that you're looking for.
Right. What do you think are some good pointers for athletes in dealing with it being cut? You were just told that you didn't make the team. How can we help athletes deal with it?
I think the first thing athletes have to do is they have to decide how much they like the sport.
Agree.
That's the first, how committed are you to the sport?
It's a sobering moment. It's a chance for you to ponder and reflect.
Yeah. And, you're in the moment of disappointment. You're in the moment of pain. Some might say that might not be the best time, but if in that moment you are committed and you have that energy just to strive and to get better at that, then I would say that's a good indicator that you want to continue to go for it.
Yeah.
If you do feel defeated, if there's something in your mind tells you would rather do this next time or do that, then maybe that's a key too, that that's what you should do. But I said it before. I think that when you try out for something, when you try for a position in life, doesn't have to be on an athletic sports team, go and find out, get some advice from the person that is making the decision, or the group that's making the decision. Ask them, what could you have done better to have made the team? Again, don't ask, who do I have to be better than, but how can I be a better athlete? What could I have done? Yeah. Or what can I do, more importantly, what can I do in this upcoming season, off season for me, to be a better athlete, so that when I come back next year and try out, I have a better chance of making it. I think that's key, and obviously that's an advantage of your process of meeting with these individuals one by one, because that's already done.
In fact, right, I would put that on the coach almost, is to say, and that's one of the things that I always do. Whenever we did have to make a cut, is I would say, one of the last things I would say to that player is, hey, here's a recommendation of if you desire to continue playing baseball, and you want to come out again next year, and you want a better chance at making the team, here are some things I would recommend. And usually it would always include one thing in particular.
I bet it's on my list.
Get stronger.
Yeah, strength and agility training. I mean, that's
usually the reason why you got cut is because you're not athletic enough.
Yeah, you want to know something funny?
You're going to get more athletic if you get stronger.
Absolutely, and this is funny because I've been working out with some guys, and they're almost disappointed. I wouldn't exactly come out and say it, but they're almost disappointed when we're finding it difficult to find time to work out because they have to go to practice or they have a
Wow.
scrimmage.
Yeah.
How about that?
Because they're loving the weight room. They're
Yeah.
loving getting stronger.
Right. And we talked about opportunities and benefits, and man, this is a great benefit because we've talked about it before. We've said it on the episode on the podcast. What's what Mark Ripto say?
If you don't get a chance to play for a year, I mean, this is a yeah. We said a while back, we said that one strength coach recommends, and he actually said, like, your sophomore year. Let's say you go into your sophomore year and you decide, I'm not playing any sports this year.
Yeah.
I'm just going to focus on getting stronger. And the reason he said sophomore year is because he said most kids are 15, 16 years old at that time, and that's the prime time to get strong.
Yeah.
And he said, if you focus just on getting stronger, I guarantee you will be twice the athlete your junior and senior year that you would have been had you not done that. And so let's say that decision's made for you as an
Exactly.
athlete.
Yeah.
You were cut from a team. You know what? Here's how way to respond. Awesome. I get to spend more time in the weight room.
Yes.
I'm going to go get stronger. I'm going to find someone that knows what they're doing to help me strength train, and I'm going to bust my tail to get as strong as I possibly can so that when I come back next year, I look like a different person.
And you can.
And you'll see it.
You
Coaches
will
see it.
They will.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
If you really love the sport and you want to try again next year, the best thing you can do for yourself is get stronger.
Yep. And I would say it's an opportunity regardless. Even if your decision is, I mentioned, decide how much you like the sport. If your decision is, I don't really like the sport. If it's football, you get cut for football, and you have football season to prepare now for basketball, or for baseball. Strength and agility training is going to do that. It's really the time that you have there, the free time. It's a golden opportunity.
Yeah, and I would even say it's more important than practicing the skills.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people would say, well, you need your arm needs to get stronger, or you need to, you might need to work. You need to get in the cage a little bit more. You need to have someone work with you on your swing. I would not recommend that. Actually, I mean, I wouldn't say
over it.
I wouldn't say don't do it, but I would definitely. If you've only got this amount of time, and you got this, and you got this is your handful of time that you've got, and you had to choose one or the other, I'd set aside all that stuff to work on getting stronger.
Because all of that stuff improves with strength and speed.
It does.
By default.
It's like you said back when we were talking about strength training, Pat, when you look at kids who are 7 and 8 years old on the ball diamond, and you ask yourself, who are the best kids? Who are the best players on the diamond back then? They haven't had time to have all the skills training back then.
Right.
They haven't had a hitting coach, and they haven't been on hit tracks, and they haven't gone out to drive line and learned how to throw. They're just raw. They're just kids. So who's the best athletes? The ones that can run the fastest, and the ones that are obviously the strongest.
Yep.
And so that is true when you're children, when you're small children. It's also true when you're 18 years old. Granted, more skill is involved, and you've got to increase in that. But if you can pick one thing to get better in that time that you've gotten cut and you want to come back the following year, get stronger.
Yeah.
Just get
This
stronger.
is not just going to make you stronger and faster either. It'll make you more confident, right?
You'll come in
it'll
with
make
a
you more
whole different
aggressive.
personality.
It will.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
best
big thing. So that would be definitely my number 1 point too. I had it starred here. So
Cool. Well, I feel like before we wrap it up, we should say something to parents. We've talked to coaches. We just talked to the athlete. Is there anything that we could say to make this easier for parents? Probably the answer to that is no.
yeah, I'm reading my notes and it's like,
Is there anything that we can say?
Patronizing to.
Well, and maybe we shouldn't say easier, because it's not easy, and not everything in life that we walk through should be easy. But maybe the best thing we could say is pause, and consider your response.
Yeah.
Consider the way you respond, because there's usually a lot more going on than what you see in the heat of the initial moment.
Yeah.
And to respond based on your initial anger and your initial frustration, your initial hurt, usually it's extremely limited, because you're not seeing the whole picture, and you're inviting a lot of other people to come and respond negatively to when they don't see the whole picture.
Oh, you mean in social media?
A lot of times when people respond, it's public, you
Yeah.
know, and if you're a parent and you don't, and you know, we know that there are a lot more parents out here who handle this well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, you know, just like anything else in life, the ones that are the loudest are the ones that get most attention.
Yeah.
And so it could be one or two people. I mean, you may have cut 8 people, and only one is really on social media making a fuss about it.
Right.
Well, what's that mean? It means probably the other 7 or 8, you know, other 6 or 7 probably sat down with their kids and said, okay, what can we learn from this experience? Yeah, it hurts. I'm hurt as well. Maybe you're really ticked at the coach, but you're not going to go out there and air it out. Yeah. It'll go away. It will go away, you know. And sometimes it doesn't go away. I mean, and this is like probably another message for coaches, and coaches probably can amen this. I've never lost more friendships than I have in my life over coaching. I mean, there are lots of reasons to lose friends, lots of reasons to lose good relationships that you've had in life. But the one most common reason that I've lost friendships is because of coaching issues, either related with cuts or related with not making it on having a role on a team that maybe mom and dad thought they would or should.
Yeah.
And
that's rough.
It is.
I think that's why I say, as a coach, you have to be comfortable with that decision. You have to be comfortable with the process of coming to that decision, because that's what gives it integrity, and you know, allows you to know that, hey, I did the best that I could in making the decision.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, it is all you can do.
Right. But for parents, I would say, you know, and we've kind of mentioned this in other perspectives in the past, you know, sports in general are humbling. They're filled with heartache and disappointment, and there's challenges, and this type of thing is just an extension to that. It's different, but really it's an opportunity to learn and to learn about life and to prepare for those types of feelings and emotions and that you're going to face in life, and you will face them in life. You know, there's no escaping it. There's disappointment in life as you go. So, you know, for a parent, I would say, it's not just this. You know, missing a foul shot, fumbling a football, letting the ball go through your legs. We've talked about it in that regard a lot.
Yeah,
it's really the same thing. It
is.
It's an opportunity presented to us to help our kids be better people and be stronger people. And if you respond, I like that word you use, if you respond the right way, you can make it beneficial to them.
It's adversity. And adversity always requires some kind of response. You don't get to control all of the events and the circumstances that life brings you. And this is one of those events and circumstances that you had a little bit of control over, in terms of you can control your effort and you can control your attitude. And I'm talking about the kid, the player. But even if you do that, you still don't control the selection.
Yeah.
And so the coach controls that. You get to control, mom and dad, you get to control your response to it. And just pause before you do.
Yeah.
Just pause and find the positive in it, because you're not going to make it better for your child by complaining a lot out there in the public. It just doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better for anyone. And you're not teaching the kind of lesson that you want your child to learn, moving forward, of how to handle adversity, how to handle disappointing situations, and even how to handle situations that you think are unfair. You were unfairly cut. What good is going to come of it if you start a campaign of negativity toward the coach, toward the organization, toward the AD, toward everybody else? There is no good that comes from it, and we're not teaching the right lesson when that's the way we go about it. I got a story that I'd like to tell. That was it's a hard story, but it has a really great ending.
Okay.
One year, when I was the varsity baseball coach, had to make cuts. Had to make a couple of cuts, and more than a couple. I think we ended up cutting 6 this year. And this was actually a player that I didn't cut. The story is about a player that I didn't cut, but it's about a player who was a junior, and we had a large senior class, and I told him that I felt like he was really going to help the varsity team the following year, but not that year, but that he needed more reps. He needed more time on the field in order to develop to the kind of player that I felt like he could be. And so I said, I would like for you, I'm going to give you 2 uniforms. I'm going to give you a varsity uniform and a JV uniform. But the majority of your time, you're going to be at the JV. And whenever JV's not playing, you're going to be with the varsity team. And there may be some times when we bring you up. Depending on how you develop during this year, it's possible that you could come up during this year. But if you're not starting and playing every day on the varsity field, I feel like it'd be more beneficial for you to be on the JV team. This was a really athletic kid, raw athletic kid at the time. So wasn't as skilled in the game. I mean, he was skilled, but he wasn't going to start. But he had a lot of athleticism. I mean, a lot of athleticism. And it was also another caveat to this is that we had other kids in other positions who were younger who made the varsity team. So maybe a sophomore or a freshman who weren't necessarily more athletic than him, but they played a different position, had a different role where there was a different availability of time, a different kind of opening in that particular position or spot.
Right. They fit better for the program.
It was a better fit. Yeah. And there's a lot of variables that go into place when you're determining who to keep, who not to keep, who to put on this team and what. And so I communicated that, and it didn't go well.
Oh, okay.
Not at all. I could tell that there was anger in his eyes, and I wondered when he left the school building that night if he'd be back. And he wasn't. His choice was to not come back. And I'll say this too. Not only did he not come back, he and his father harassed the team. They would come to the team and openly root against us in some of our games. So he was upset.
Interesting.
Got text from the dad, phone call that night, threatening type things, and things I had to actually involve the AD in and say, hey, listen, just want to let you know, this is what happened. This is how I communicated it. This is he's choosing not to come back and play. But not only that, they're pretty upset. It was tough. It was tough.
Yeah, no doubt.
Tough week or so, and tough whole year actually, because it was
They just kept going.
Yeah,
they did.
They'd come to games and make fun of the players and things like that. It was as ugly of any kind of scenario that I could have imagined when it comes to cutting or playing time and having just a negative thing happen on your team. You don't ever want to have kids from your own school rooting against you, and it was just ugly.
Jeez.
And so yeah. So this player didn't come back, or obviously didn't come back that year. You know what? I take that back. He was not a junior. He was a sophomore that year. He was a sophomore. Yeah. Felt like he should be on the varsity team because he didn't play his junior year. And then his senior year, he came out. Didn't even come out to try out his junior year. Didn't figure he would. But his senior year, after football season, this was a 3-sport athlete, ended up not playing basketball senior year, so he had time in the off season. He came to me. He actually texted me. I got this text from a kid that I saw the name, and I'm like, I haven't heard from him in 2 years. I wonder what this is about. And he said, Coach, I'm thinking about coming back out to baseball this year, but I wanted to ask you if it would be okay. And I said, I responded back to him, and I said, why don't you and I get together and we'll dialogue about it. And so he was open to that, and we met together. And the reason he's texting me is because we were about to begin our off-season strength training program, and so he wanted to come to that if I was okay with him playing baseball. So I met with him, and when I opened up the conversation with him, I said, I got to be honest with you, I'm a little surprised. I was really surprised to get your text.
Yeah.
And he said, I would imagine you were. And I could immediately see a different kind of maturity in him from what I had experienced prior to that. And I said, well, you tell me, why, if you're in my shoes, you tell me, why would I want you to come back and play your senior year? After what we've experienced together, And he said this. He said, well, the first thing that I should do is ask for your forgiveness. He said, I behaved really poorly. I was embarrassed because I felt like I should be on the varsity team, when a couple years ago, and I was wrong. He said, the way I was wrong. It wasn't right. And he said, I want to come out here and make it right by being the best I can be my senior year on the baseball. I love baseball. I should have never stopped playing to begin with, and I just handled things wrong. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, I am not one to withhold forgiveness, and seeing your attitude right now makes me feel like you are genuine, but you're going to prove that this off season. I mean, you have plenty of opportunity to prove it. I'm not saying you need to prove it. I'm just saying you're going to have plenty of opportunity to prove it. And because we start our strength training this Monday, and you have the chance to be there, to show up. I said, because here's what else. There are a lot of kids that are still playing on this ball team that heard you openly root against them.
Right.
And you've lost a lot of trust with them, I'm sure, in that case. And so you're going to need to improve some of those relationships. He says, I understand that, sir, and I'll do it. He did.
Yeah.
He did every single day. He never missed a single lifting session, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that entire off season. Was always the first one there, was always the last one to leave, was always the first one to step up and encourage kids. There were obviously kids in the weight room who had never been in the weight room before, and he was not a novice at lifting. He knew how to lift, and he would go over and help them. And I could see, because I had assistant coaches that came up to me and said, "Are you sure about having him on the
Sure,
team?"
I probably would, yeah.
Yeah, and I said, "Look, I understand. I understand the hesitancy, but this is a changed kid. This is a different kid." Now, I never did talk to his dad again. I don't know what happened there. I think his dad lived in a different town, but man, he ended up being the type of player. He was so athletic and so competitive that he would sometimes have a temper issue on the field, and we had games. There's one game in particular that year where we were playing against a rival and we were losing, and he had an opportunity. He was on first base, and he had pitcher makes a pickoff move and overthrows first base. He goes diving in, sees that there was an overthrow, so he goes to second, and the ball still hasn't gotten to the right fielder yet, so I'm waving him to third. And the right fielder picks up the ball, throws a perfect strike to the third baseman who's standing at the bag. It's a bang-bang play. He dives in head first. Third baseman slaps a tag down on his head as hard as he could, and I could hear fans behind me, behind the fence, saying, "That a way to slap it down on that a-hole."
Oh, man.
Yeah. That's reputation that he built for himself,
Yeah.
But it was also the type of it wasn't all him. I mean, it wasn't all him either. I mean, it was the opponent we were playing too.
Yeah.
So,
well, we'll leave that out.
Yeah, right. Right. We won't get specific there. But it was just a fiery game. I expected there to be a fight right there. I mean,
You're preparing for it. You're like, oh boy, here we go.
I almost got in between him and he got up with dirt in his face. I mean, his face hit the ground when that kid slapped the tag on the back of his head hard. He was called out, and he got up, he had dirt in his mouth. He ate dirt on that. Sprinted off the field to the dugout, and the kids in the dugout were ready to come out. I mean, they were ticked, and he was like, "No," he's like, "Let's go. Let's rally. Let's go." And I mean, and it was nothing but let's win this game. Let's not let them get to us. And I'm like, that is not the same kid.
Yeah,
that's not the same kid that I've seen in the last 3 years. Here and the whole year he was the man that was rallying. I mean, that rallied our team, and he all the way to the end. And so at the end of that season, we went to the regional final and lost. And the regional final, so one game away from the state semifinal, and we're standing there in the outfield, and I'll never forget the hug he gave me, and what he said. He said, "Thanks for the second chance, Coach." You don't get that. You don't get those stories very often.
Yeah.
And you can I get transported right back to that place so quickly, and it's those tears that well up in my eyes are tears of joy.
Yeah.
And they could have been the opposite.
Right.
It could have been. There could have not been a happy ending to that story, but there was, and it began with a player who I didn't cut, but essentially gave him a kind of role that he didn't appreciate.
Right. And a player that recognized fault in himself and recognized a desire to be a better person and you know, to come back and to say he wanted to make things right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge part of that story there.
And he did. And every player, one of the things that my assistant coaches were concerned about was the way the other kids would, I had a coach saying, "Hey, do you think we should ask the kids to vote on it, whether he should come back?" I said, "No, it's not the kid's decision.
Yeah.
It's my decision."
I agree with that. Yeah.
And I said, if he comes back, then the kids need to understand and respect the decision that the coaches have made.
Yeah.
That he's coming back because we believe that he's a different person. He's going to help. He's going to help the team.
Well, and I would say, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Well, I would say that the culture of the program has to be a certain type of culture to be able to handle that situation too.
Yeah.
So that's a credit to you and your coaching staff and to the players on the roster as well that they were able to receive him and allow him to be a valuable part of that team again.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
something that you all can tip your hat. Yeah, it's just a good story all around.
It is. So. It's one of my favorite stories to tell after the fact. It wasn't fun to walk through there.
No, I bet not
at the beginning. But I'll tell you that. You still the entire year you're kind of just waiting. Okay, is the old man going to come back out? I mean, not the old man.
No, I got you.
Not the dad. Is the old person going to come back out again?
Right.
He never did.
Yeah,
he was legitimately a different person.
But that's a great story to close the episode on because here we're talking about a kid that lost 2 years of his high school athletic career, and not just 2 years. His sophomore and junior year, which so important.
And again, it was his choice,
right?
Right. We didn't cut this kid.
Sure, I understand.
It was his choice.
But regardless, he didn't have those years.
Yeah.
If he had been cut, it would have been the same type of challenge.
Right.
And he was able to come back and make an impact. So
yeah, definitely.
One cut, one decision, one failure in life doesn't define us if we don't let it. We can rise above those things.
Yeah, so that's a message for the players. It's a message for coaches as well.
Yeah, definitely. Great stuff, Coach.
Thanks for bearing with me.